Thanks, Karen. It's really nice to be here, and really I should have just let Karen talk, right? Either that or hire her as my press agent. What do you think? So coming here today was actually a little bit like a trip down memory lane. I was sharing with you on the way in that I actually was a grad from Wilfrid Laurier in social work many, many decades ago, and really haven't been back that often to Waterloo, not to this part of Waterloo at least. And I'm driving in today thinking, well, why don't I recognize things? Who here is sort of born and bred Waterloo, Kitchener area? And if you live here now, how many of you grew up here or have lived here for a long time? Many of you? So do you remember Four Wells? Oh yeah. Well, it's not there anymore. So I lived at Kingan University. And at first, when I looked today, I thought, oh, they've torn down my apartment building. How could they do that? And then when I looked, I could see it up a couple of blocks. I remembered it as being closer. But I do remember stocking up on licorice and other kinds of not so healthy things for me as I was studying. And so today when I drove by and I didn't see Four Wells, and so much looks different, and then I'm thinking, well, it's 40 years. Did I really think it was going to look the same? So it was just kind of fun driving up, and at least I recognized Hazel Street and Albert and some of the others, so I'm glad they didn't change the names. I'm really pleased to be here with you, and there are so many things that I could talk about that we do at the center. And perhaps after the break, when there's a little bit more informal conversation, there'll be a chance to share with you some of the other things that we do. But for today, Karen asked me to focus a little bit on some of the things we do around physical movement. So we do quite a bit of work in the creative and performing arts and the health benefits of participation. So in addition to movement kinds of things, we have done work in music, writing, visual arts. But I'm not going to talk about them today, but we'll be quite open to questions after the break. As a matter of fact, I'm quite open to questions if you want to just stop me as we're talking. I'm a pretty informal person. So this morning I'm really going to just tell you a little bit about our mission. I want to talk about some work that wasn't done by me, but a researcher out of the US who's passed away now, Dr. Gene Cohen, because you'll see how he inspired my own work in this area. I had sent something to Dr. Alex Kalash, who I'd worked with from the World Health Organization. He now is the president of the Longevity Center in Rio, Brazil. And I didn't realize at first that I'd sent him something where I used the title that I'm using for today, and he wrote back and he said, I love that title, like, could we use it for a research grant? So everybody, I'm not going to tell you that it's important to move, because I know that you already know that. So this is the mission statement of the center, and as Karen said, we celebrated our 10th anniversary this past September. And one of the things that's remained very constant throughout all of these years is our mission. And essentially it's to develop, design, test, implement, evaluate any products, programs, and services that benefit older adults and their families. Sometimes people say to me, well, what do you mean by an older adult? And I always end up having to give kind of a not so great answer, really, that says for our work, it really depends on what we're doing. So I have to weave. Is it okay if I weave a few snippets of other things in here? So for example, we're hosting a major business of aging conference in June. And some of the students I work with from Sheridan's advertising and business department are doing some background work for me on that. And one of the things we've discovered in the marketing world is that actually nobody really pays much attention to you once you're over 65 or 70. All the databases about marketing preferences of mature consumers lump everyone together over that age. So for example, for that project, we're running focus groups right now with adults 70 plus to be sure that we hear their voices. You know, we want the marketers to start paying attention. I don't think anybody here would disagree with me that just because you're 70, 75, 80, that you no longer purchase products. It just isn't true, right? So I see some laughs, and I know you'll agree. When it comes to dance, we've sometimes had people involved as young as 55, really under the premise that why make you wait? to participate in this. Other projects we do are maybe 65. But I would say generally, I would say most of our work is with people about 60 and older. And we've had people 90 and older than that. We had a woman 92 the other day approach us wanting to know how to use Facebook. Because we do a lot of work that I won't focus on today in technology. That would be another primary theme. So that really is all focused on enhancing quality of life. One of my children is missing here, but that's my husband, my son and daughter, and my parents at the bottom. So my father and my mom really have inspired my work as well. Another thing I had observed is that when you talk about creative aging, if you Google that, if you go home, those of you who use computers, and Google that, you almost always will come up with a definition that relates to the arts. That's all I found, really. And so a couple of years ago, 2012, I thought, well, I'm going to write my own definition then, because this one is too limiting. Because I would argue that obviously, if you're participating in the arts, there's a creative element to it, but you can be aging creatively no matter what you're doing. So I just wanted to share this with you. I tried to write a definition that made sense to me, that was really one that says that, from my perspective, until you take that last breath, we need to free ourselves of any limiting beliefs that we may have about what we can do. And it isn't just society that imposes those. Mature adults themselves often say, I've heard them say to me, well, I can't do that, I'm too old. So we want to dispel that and really help people to understand that they can grow, learn, and contribute throughout their whole life. And I have a feeling that you wouldn't be here this morning if you didn't share that belief. Is that right? Exactly. So let me start with telling you about the work that Gene Cohen had done. He had done the first different sites. There were 3 sites, you'll see them at the bottom. The first longer study that focused on the impact of participation in arts activities on general health, mental health, and social activities. These were the 3 sites at the bottom here: Elders Share the Arts in Brooklyn, Center for Youth and Elders, San Francisco, and the Levine School of Music in Washington. So keep in mind, I'm sharing this with you not because I did it, but because he really inspired my own work. So in his study, all the adults were 65 plus, and remember, it was longitudinal over a period of time, but when they started, they were all pretty much living independently. And they had an approximate age of 80. So you'll see the age range was pretty big, 65 to 100, 300 participants. And they repeated the measures that they were using with them for 2 years. What he wanted to do, you'll see when we get to our work, it's a little bit different, but he wanted to evaluate the effects of participating in cultural programs run by professional artists on general health, mental health, overall functioning, and sense of well-being. These were some of the results in his work. The people that participated generally had better overall health. They had fewer doctor's visits. The next one I think is really important, fewer medications. Many older adults are taking so many medications that if by participating in some of these activities you can reduce from 6 to 4, for example, then I think that's something worth looking at. Fewer falls. He didn't do any physical measures, so you'll see when we get to ours, we're interested in physical measures that might help with the fewer falls. Fewer participants were reporting other health problems. There was generally better morale, less loneliness. Social isolation is a huge, huge challenge for many older adults. You can be alone even when you're living with other people. And greater participation in activities overall. So it was pretty astounding, the results. That study in the States has never been replicated in the States or Canada. So if you move to our work then in dance, we were funded, as you'll see here at the bottom, by the Canadian Institutes of Health Research. And how many of you are familiar with Sheridan College, where Karen worked and where I work? Then you may know that although I'd like to say Sheridan is best known for their work in aging, the reality is that we have the second largest art school in North America, and we're best known for the arts. So we have just an awesome music theater program. If you ever have a chance to attend a performance, I'd suggest you take it in. And I've been working really closely with the dance teachers there. So we developed, the royal we, I should state I'm not the dancer. I helped them to develop a dance curriculum that we refer to it as ballet inspired and yoga infused. It's movement. It's not Swan Lake. One of the long-term care homes that we worked with in the beginning said, like, you're not going to make them, wear pink tutus and do something that's dangerous, are you? And we said, no, absolutely not. But the two of the dance teachers that we work with both came from the National Ballet of Canada. So absolutely it has that ballet, the kind of developing core strength and those kind of movements, but we don't call it ballet. So we developed a 12-week program, except for the Sheridan site, which was 9, where people came together twice a week. You need at least 3 months before you can actually measure change, so that's why the 12 weeks. We had several different types of sites, but we had 7 sites in total. So we actually were in Kitchener and Guelph. We worked with Winston Park. Do you know the village of Winston Park? And Kitchener. And Riverside Glen, is it, in Guelph, both Schlegel villages. We did 1 on-campus site at Sheridan College. We worked in a supportive housing location in Burlington. We did a small pilot with our own Alzheimer's Day program. I shouldn't say our own. As Karen said, it's in our center, but it's run by Acclaim Health, where we have a research and education partnership, so they're responsible for the day-to-day running of the program. And then we did 1 expansion site in Vancouver in the winter of 2012. And to be honest with you, we did that for a couple of reasons. Primarily because as we're applying for other research funding, we want to be able to demonstrate to funders that we can manage projects remotely, that we don't have to be there ourselves. And one of our dance teachers that was involved in the research moved to Vancouver, so it ended up being convenient for us to do it there because she knew the program. And so right now we actually have an application into CIHR for a 3-year operating grant to expand our program right across Canada. So we've done it. We have had that particular program in a lot of sites. These are the kinds of things we looked at. You'll see it's a little bit different than what Gene Cohen looked at. We wanted to look whether that participation twice a week resulted in improvement in physical measures, whereas I said he didn't look at physical measures. Others would be similar to what Gene looked at. We asked, does participation lead to an improvement in psychological measures of well-being, and will reports of basically self-control, feelings of control, and psychological well-being increase over the course of the dance classes. What I'm going to report to you today are the results only from the Oakville site. Okay, so remember we did it in 7 places, but in Oakville we had, I think it'll be on one of these slides, I think it was about 37 participants. So it's just that group I'm going to report on. And you'll see that we had a lot of measures we were looking at. We were looking at endurance, upper and lower body strength, balance. I'm sure there's no one in this room that doesn't know that the most frequent cause of admission to emergency rooms is what? Falls, exactly. So if we can improve balance through dance, then hopefully you can help people to reduce the number of falls. We looked at speed of movement, flexibility. Again, the more you can reach and do things and stay flexible, the more independent you're going to be able to stay. And most people want to stay living in their own home, or at least a home of their choice. We looked at, we looked at weight. There's a scale, the PANAS scale, that looks at mood, people's mood. The World Health Organization has a huge quality of life scale, but they also have a small one they call a brief one, which we used. Except for the adults that had Alzheimer's disease, we asked all of our participants to maintain guided journals throughout the experience, and we also had the dance teachers do that. In terms of those quantitative measures, we use the Senior Fitness Test Kit. So it will have things like the sit and stand up and go test. There's a number of different things there. I'm glad I was able to do that. Weight, obviously, is pretty easy to measure. There's a Berg balance scale that we use. As I mentioned, the World Health Organization quality of life scale. We look at exercise habits questionnaire, exercise barriers. Maybe when we come back after the break, I want to learn from you more about some of your health practices, your lifestyle practices, and maybe a little bit about some of the barriers to exercise, other than having just come through one of the most brutal winters that we've ever had, which kind of limited walking outdoors, didn't it? And then the PANAS scale. So I'm not going to give you all of the results today, but I'll give you some just so you know the kind of research that we do. So we have 39, I was 37, I was pretty close. The average age at the Oakville site was 67. You can see that we're pretty gender imbalanced. So men in the room, we need to get you out dancing with us. I go to Zumba a couple times a week, and there's about maybe 35 people in my class, and there's one man. So I admire his tenacity. We need to find a way to get more men involved. There were 4 in this group that wore hearing aids and 28 that reported taking medication. So that's a pretty high group, actually, for taking medications. That's about 2/3 of the group. And these are some of the reported health conditions that they reported having. This is why some of them said that they wanted to participate in the research. I really like the bottom one. I don't know whether they said that just because they thought that might be what we would like to hear, to participate in research. But as you can see, the highest percentage of people wanted to engage in physical fitness and exercise. And some of them just enjoyed dance, and you'll see it's sort of a descending scale there. You can read that as well. About 2/3 of them said that their general health was good and that their sleep was good. This was a little lower than I thought it would be on a kind of a 5-point scale, like with 5 being excellent and 1 being very poor. They rated their frequency of their social interactions at about 2.9 and the rating of their quality of them at 3. One other thing I should just add, when I was talking to you a little bit about the different sites we were involved in, I mean, we really had a wonderful range from people who were living independently in the community to people who were living in long-term care. So just keep in mind that the Oakville site, because it was at our college, they were all, I mean, they wouldn't, in all honesty, they would not be very representative necessarily of the general population because they all would have been community dwelling. They had to drive to be able to come there. Maybe some drove together. I'm not really sure about the specifics of the transportation, but in general, they would be a pretty healthy, pretty mobile group, and I had thought they would have ranked some of the social interaction a little bit higher. These were some of the outcomes that we had. We saw improvements in all of these dimensions: weight, lower and upper body strength, shoulder flexibility, speed of movement, balance, the physical aspects of life, and their increased mood and decreased negative mood. I'll tell you a little bit more about some of those things. We also interviewed all of the participants before the classes and after the classes, and 74% said that they did meet their personal goals by participating in the classes. The 2 that are, or 3, I think, that are most important to me are these 3, where people felt that it did have a positive impact on their mood, that they reported positive socialization with the other people in the class, and that they thought it had, in general, a positive impact on their socialization with other people. One of the things I should just mention that I particularly like about this group, so the Oakville-based group at our college was in May, June, in the spring of 2010. So that's 4 years ago. 8 of those women are still dancing together. They call themselves, I love this, they brought me a t-shirt a couple of weeks ago that says, "Ladies at the Bar." Don't you love it? I think I got to ask them if I can use that for a title for a grant application or something. But and we brought them back because the alumni magazine at my college is going to be featuring our center in their June issue, and in a centerfold. And you can't possibly talk about everything we do on that one page. So I said, well, you know what? I get a lot of attention, and it's easier to get grants in the technology area. let's focus on the arts because that's the hardest area for me to generate funding. So what we did was we brought these 8 women back a couple of weeks ago for a photo shoot. That's when they brought me the t-shirt. And when one of them, who communicates with me still a bit, we're not involved in research with them anymore, but at the end of the dance, they talked to the dance teacher, they figured out how much they could afford to pay her, they found a place to dance, and as I said, they're still going. But when she wrote to me, and think about these 3 things, to confirm that they were all coming and everything, she said, Pat, over these 4 years, yes, we danced together, but we've seen each other through divorce, death, illness. I don't remember the other examples specifically, but really, it's obviously gone far beyond the dance. And when they came, one of them said, well, we danced because then after dance, we go for poutine. I said, oh, okay. So I guess you have to wear off some calories or something before you go. But just lovely to see that. This number is a little bit lower than I would have liked, but what we were hoping, and it did happen, is that once you participate in an activity, and I realize that I'm really talking to the converted here today because you're obviously all still engaged, but we were hoping that that would encourage people to do other things. Like if you're really liking the dance, maybe you'll go for a walk or whatever, ride a bike, whatever it is. So about 28% said that they did start participating in other activities. This is from their journals. You'll just see some of the things they said. I don't have any stiff joints. I had a tight right shoulder. I'd taken therapy, but the dance class got rid of that. Balance, you see, she's talking about was better. So these are all physical. I have literally hundreds of these comments in all these journals, but I just brought a couple for demonstration. So those are physical impact kinds of things. I love this. I just love this one. In terms of brain function, because the other thing that's really important to people that we won't talk too much about today, except that I did bring you all a brain that you can take away with you as a stress ball. But we want to do things to maintain our cognition. And dance is absolutely the way to go if you want to do that, because it involves arms and legs. I'll tell you, even when I go to my Zumba class, if I lose my sense of focus for a minute, I'm going to fall all over and trip on my feet or something. So, it really requires such concentration. It's not just the foot movement. Part of the reason we did the kind of dance we do is it does involve arms as well, where something like line dancing, as an example, doesn't particularly involve upper body movement. But I love this top one, where this participant talked about rehearsing the warm-up routine in her head, and that she remembered about 80% of it. And I like this as well, that it's, they're not dancing as a hobby, they're dancers, right? And there's quite a distinction there. And this person talks about it became more challenging, they had to focus, and that their minds were at work as they were having to remember the steps. When you talk about physical movement, really, there's evidence that shows that it helps to decrease the onset of dementia, for example. The only physical movement that has been demonstrated to do that with any reliability is dance. Okay. And in terms of the emotional impact, isn't this one lovely at the bottom? It was like coming home to the bar. Do you think this is where they got their name from, ladies at the bar? To the music, the sound of the piano. She talks about her inner dancer had been buried for so many years. I don't know if this will work, actually. I brought you just a 2-minute clip to show you just what happens in the dance class, but I realized that I don't have external speakers, so I turned up my speakers on my laptop. If you can't hear it or it doesn't work, and it's probably, let's see if I can see if it will work. It's just like 2 minutes, but if it doesn't work, we just won't use it. I just thought you might like to see our dancers. Tell me if it does anything.
We're getting more.
Yeah. So you may, if the sound quality may not be very good because it's just. That just gives you, I hope, a little bit of a taste of what we do there.
We think we could manage that nicely.
You think you could manage that? I don't know if I'd get that pivot right, but you can see Jillian talking about the arms and just the cognitive skills required when you're using arms and legs. These are some of our dancers in the supportive housing site. And this is Paula. It's Paula that moved to Vancouver that did our expansion site. And this is another one of our teachers, Barb. She's the one who's still teaching the 8 women. And this was in one of the Schlegel Village homes, actually. I don't remember if it was Winston Park or Riverside Glen. But I wanted you to see the range of people that have participated in our dance project. Just, did we start?
We started a little late.
Okay. In terms of just more evidence for dance, again, this isn't our work, but I thought this was just more evidence from a study that explored non-professional dancers who completed an online survey about their perceptions with the benefits of dance. And again, talking about impacting mood, physical well-being, self-esteem, and socialization. The thing that, again, I find very significant in some of these studies is the fact that it relates to better cognitive function as well. I'll just mention a couple of other movement-inspired things that we've done. A couple of summers ago, we had a summer student from one of our degree programs at Sheridan who was it's the exercise science and health promotion degree, who also teaches Latin dance and Taekwondo. And so we did some pilot work in that area. But really, it wasn't so much the dance with our work with Manuel. Part of my goal in the arts and in technology is to have arts and technology bridge. And what I would like to do is make arts-based activities available to people wherever they live, kind of like being videotaped today. So that if people were living in a remote geographic area and couldn't get out, maybe they're living in Kitchener and they can't get out in the middle of the winter because it's so bad. You don't have to be living remotely necessarily. But we wanted to see how that would work. So we had face-to-face participants, the way you saw in that video, at Sheridan. But we had them joining with people remotely because we want to see if we can't make this accessible to everybody. With a dismal failure. For the people that were face-to-face with us in our studio, it was a roaring success, just as good as anything else we've done. So it wasn't the Taekwondo, where we actually did get some men, by the way, and it wasn't the Latin dance, it was the technology. So I haven't given up. I'm still looking at that area. You learn, Albert Einstein famously said, if we knew what we were doing, it wouldn't be research. And so we're still wanting to figure that out, but the problem was that some of the older adults that were participating remotely, they had really old computer equipment, or they lived in a community that didn't yet have broad bandwidth. So it was nothing about these two activities. It was that the technology wasn't keeping up. And plus we were also learning, because the people remotely would be saying, Manuel, you're standing, because he was with us, you're standing in front of the camera or something like that. So he had a few things to learn about that as well, but I'm still wanting to do that, to see how we can bridge, not just with dance, but with other forms, with anything really, where our other commitment in another area I'm doing some work in is just lifelong learning. And that would be another example where very often lifelong learning programs, yours may be an exception, I don't know, but they often, if you do any lit reviews on that, they're not often really meaning lifelong. They're meaning baby boomers and people in their 70s maybe. And so I'm working right now, for example, I shouldn't name the name, I guess, but with a national retirement and long-term home care chain to link people in Ontario, residents who live there in Ontario and British Columbia, creating an online community of learners. Because I don't think you stop learning just because you're living in a retirement home. So, everything we do is kind of recognizing that life course approach. Karen asked me to mention also the work we've done in yoga. I'm going to go through this one pretty quickly because you know what? The outcomes that we see are pretty similar regardless of what the form of activity. So again, we want, it'll sound to you a little bit like the dance really, and what it's all about is offering older adults choice. So you have a whole menu of activities you can participate in. So yoga is one of them. We wanted to look at how yoga impacted physical health and psychological well-being. We wanted again to see whether it could be an effective alternative to gym-based programs. That's a little bit why we got into dance as well. We thought that there would be a lot of people who don't necessarily want to go to a gym. And I'd love to talk about this after the break because I want to know whether if you were going to the gym, would you rather be in a class with peers or would you rather have it be intergenerational? So that's a question for you after the break. And really, again, wanting to see whether attitudes would change towards exercise in general. So just in terms of yoga, I know Karen said to focus on physical today, but I loved, my daughter teaches yoga in Vancouver, and I saw this on the studio she works at, their website. I loved it, where it says yoga is not about touching your toes, it's about what you learn on the way down. And Karen may not, she's too modest, probably hasn't told you that she's a trained yoga teacher as well. So I think she would agree with that it's not, we're body, mind, and spirit. It's very hard for me to separate just out the body. But yoga does improve your flexibility. It helps people to cope with chronic conditions, arthritis, fibromyalgia, and it teaches some of these techniques, breathing and meditation. When I looked at this, I read something recently about your health really, as you age, is very much connected to your spine health. And yoga is something that really manipulates and keeps that spine flexible. Just talking about it makes me want to twist. So this is what our participants said. I feel more limber, alert. Can't remember when I last took a deep breath and stretched the old body to its limits. Good to feel simple exercises that improve mental health. This person also mentions mental health, really, and coping with various activities. So that's what we've done in yoga. A couple things I just wanted to share with you, and I've alluded to it earlier, because I want to show you where we're going with our dance. And I have a lot of work for you after the break, because I have another question when we come back. But this is the most recent in Canada study that was done on experiences with primary health care, 2008. I've tried to find whether there's something more recent, and there isn't. That was the last one that was done nationally. But you'll see here that three out of every 4 Canadians, 65 plus, that's a lot of people, 3/4, are reporting having at least one of these chronic health conditions. And about 1/4 of them are reporting more than 3. When I was trying to see whether there was more up-to-date information to share with you, I couldn't find it. So this is from the same 2008 Stats Canada information. But I thought you might like to see that it's fairly consistent across the province, but with the 3/4 of older adults, 65 plus. But you'll see it's actually quite a bit higher on the East Coast. And then the anomaly here would be in Alberta, where it's about comparable to East Coast stats. This is your work when we come back. So for the first time, about a month ago maybe, I thought, well, what do we know? We can't look at all chronic health conditions at once. For one thing, we don't have a big enough studio, and you wouldn't have a big enough sample. So knowing that diabetes is so prevalent among older adults, I said, well, why don't we do a study using the dance protocol that I've just shared with you, but we'll do it with people who are insulin-dependent type 2 diabetics. Insulin-dependent so that they are tracking their insulin levels, because one of the things we would have looked at would be, does that participation over 12 weeks reduce blood glucose levels? And if you're taking oral medication or you're controlled by diet, you're not checking your insulin as regularly, so this is why the insulin-dependent. We've also done workshops in dance, belly dance, Zumba Gold. Normally, everything we do in dance, I'm turning people away. I did not get one person who wanted to participate, not one. I've got some theories in my mind about why that might have been. And when I created this PowerPoint to come here today, before I pulled this project, or I shouldn't say pulled it, I did pull it, but I'm going to do it. I just have to figure out another way to do it. So I almost took this slide out, and then I thought, no, I'm going to leave it in because it still shows you where we're going. It'll be the first time we're trying to do something to really benefit people with chronic health conditions. But all of us were sitting, shaking our head and saying, not one. And the woman who would do the registration for me said, Pat, how many people do you want to cap it at, the class at? And I said, let's cap it at 40, because that's about the maximum you can fit in our dance studios. And if we get if we get that many, we'll hire one of the students from the music theater program to assist the teacher. 40? We didn't get one. So I want you to give me your theory when we get back. Just a couple of other things which are starting to get more out of my area of expertise, but I'm just wanting to focus on physical movement in general. We all know that exercise controls body weight, lowers blood pressure, strengthens our muscles, elevates our mood. That increase in muscle mass can help us to metabolize drugs more effectively. As I said, it's been linked to a decreased risk of dementia, but particularly dance. So how many people here know the story of Olga Kotelko? No? I'm going to see if I can find something online and send it to Karen that she can maybe post. But she is just an amazing woman who lives in Vancouver, 94 years old, is a track star, just breaking every record you could ever break. Does anybody here happen to subscribe to Zoomer magazine? She was featured in last month's Zoomer magazine. So if you, or the month before, I'm not sure.
Interviewed on CBC.
Yeah, Karen's my CBC junkie. But read the story of Olga Kotelko. Now, everything I've read about her would indicate that there's something unique about her and her genetic makeup and everything that allows her to do these amazing things at her age. But regardless, I still think it's inspiring. We're really, and I wanted to show you this for two reasons. Everybody here also knows that a nutritious diet is important. It's funny, the timing of this, because I've done only 2 research projects related to nutrition, but just earlier this week, our president asked me if I would meet with him with a lady in Oakville who owns 2 restaurants in Oakville, and she has a cooking show on the Cogeco cable program there, station there. And she's been doing work with children and food, nutrition, and then she's branched into healthy families, and they were meeting with me because she now wants to branch into healthy eating and healthy food with older adults. And we talked, it all links together if you think about it, because we talked again with her about social isolation and how too many older adults, if they live alone, I'm generalizing just for discussion purposes, but often can default. I know my mom would have done this if my dad hadn't been around, would just default to tea and toast. Not so concerned about nutrition, because eating can also be very social, and I know I'm the only thing standing between you and those cookies and coffee and water. But one of the reasons, that's the general food guide, but I thought you might find this interesting, and I think Karen would find this interesting, because I have a curiosity, I guess you could put it that way, about food and healing and how food can heal. So when I was thinking about what I wanted to do with you today, this is a University of Michigan site, but I just thought it was interesting because it's a little bit of a different pyramid that talks about healing foods. So I understand this will be on your website, right? If people want to, is that right? This presentation?
Yes, yes.
And so if you want to source any of these things, you'll be able to do that. And the only other thing I want to come back to that I mentioned, and this would be the last slide really, is although I'm focused today on movement and the importance of movement, I don't want any of us here to forget that that's only one aspect of healthy aging. And so I brought copies for all of you of the International Council on Aging's 7 dimensions of active aging. So you'll see physical was our focus for today's presentation, but they talk about intellectual, environmental, emotional, vocational, spiritual, and social. So I printed off just a copy that just describes what they mean by each of those. And I cleaned my office. I do it once a decade. And I found in my drawer 100 ways to live to be 100. So I thought you might enjoy that as well. I've brought copies of that for you. And that would be my formal talk. And I hope you remember, though, that after the break we have homework for you. Okay, so thanks so much. Do you want to break first, or do you want a couple questions? If there's any questions
If
before.
anyone has a question that you want right now, go for it. Otherwise, we'll just refresh our coffee and cookies and come back. We can bring it back, because last week we couldn't have it in the room, but today we can just bring it back here. To
Oh, I forgot I had coffee. Any questions right now or comments or?